Hello everyone and welcome to Life Journal Jumpstart. My name is Cindy Burgess and I'll be your host today. Today is July 26th and we're going to provide a little bit of context and history into what's going on in today's Life Journal readings. Our Life Journal readings today are Isaiah 46 through 49 and 1 Peter 5. So when we jump into Isaiah 46 through 49, this is that second half of the book of Isaiah. In the second half of the book of Isaiah, starting in chapter 40, it's the prophet speaking God's comfort to his people. Over the span of these chapters from 40 to chapter 66, it's Isaiah the prophet talking about that God will release his people from captivity. He speaks of the future Redeemer that will come and the future kingdom that will be established. In this section, the prophet Isaiah addresses the Babylonians' false gods that were being worshipped in the time, Bel and Nebo, and the reality that these false gods cannot protect anyone. They cannot protect the Babylonians. They certainly can't protect God's people. He reminds God's people that there is one true God to be worshipped, and it's him and him alone and no one else. In chapter 47, the prophet Isaiah predicts the fall of Babylon, and he calls Babylon this pleasure-seeking kingdom, and they're self-sufficient, and they're not accountable to anyone, and that God would bring them to ruin. They've showed God's people no mercy, and now it was time for them to be judged. Isaiah goes on to correct God's people in chapter 48. He calls them on their rebellion. He calls them on their sin, but he also promises them the salvation of God even in the middle of their sin. And then in chapter 9, he speaks of God's promises to reestablish the land of Israel, that he would reassign his people again to their land, and that it ends with the promise that their names are written on the very hand of God. Such a beautiful passage and an incredible promise for God's people. And then jumping to our New Testament passage, 1 Peter 5, we're looking at the Apostle Peter, and he knew persecution firsthand. He was beaten and he was jailed. He was threatened, his life threatened often. He had seen Christians die, and the church was scattered before his eyes. He knew Christ, and even in the persecution, he knew that nothing could shake his confidence, nothing could shake his faith in Christ. He wrote to the church that was being scattered and the church that was suffering for their faith, and he was providing them comfort and hope in the middle of their suffering and urging the church to stay loyal to Christ no matter the persecution they were facing. In our reading today, Peter also gives some special instructions to members of the church. To the elders, he says you should care for the flock that is in your care. For younger men, he's saying submit yourselves to those who are older. And those who are older should trust God and resist Satan. Pretty much no one is left out of his encouragement in these passages. He also introduces Silas, and by sending a personal greeting, possibly from a church in Rome, along with Mark. And he's encouraging the church in this passage today in 1 Peter 5. He's encouraging them that when you suffer for doing what is right, remember that following Christ is a costly commitment. When persecuted for your faith, rejoice that you've been counted worthy to suffer for your Lord. Because he suffered for us, we will also share in his suffering. So as you read 1 Peter 5 today, remember that when trials come, they come to refine our faith. And that when they come, we need to remain faithful to God. As you read today, ask yourself the question, how will I be different because of what I've read today?